I started to. He had to go back for some tests today, but he was in a lot of pain. A lot of pain.
Yeah, yeah.
I've had multiple stones. I do know exactly what he's dealing with. So
Gotcha.
it's not something I ever want again, ever. Mm.
All right.
Uh, Dr. Lamb, we may be fewer in number tonight, but that's okay.
Oh, that's all right.
Yeah, the ones that we work with the ones we've got.
And they're the good ones.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's
But
kind of
that-
like you have to teach the kids you have, not the ones you want.
right. But I appreciate the ones that are faithful and they continue to join us no matter what.
There'll be an extra lump of coal in their stocking this Christmas.
Oh, come on, Santa.
Oh, man.
Santa can be mean.
Uh,
No, not at all.
he thinks he thinks he is.
No.
But anyway, well, we've got 7 o'clock. We're going to go ahead and get started, and we thank those that have joined for joining us this evening. And I say we want is based on how things go, but I don't perceive being on here for an entire hour. But if we do, then we are. But the whole purpose was to go back and to revisit some of the things that we've talked about over the last couple of weeks with the Aptell development, with some of the questions that I was getting, and I just wanted to make sure, or we wanted to make sure that that all the puzzle pieces were fitting together. And so you will hear a lot of all of pretty much the very same stuff again tonight, but that's not a bad thing. We just want to make sure that you do understand what you're doing, because we have a very short turnaround time. Time is running out. You've got about 4 weeks to get all of this done, and that 5th week is when we pull it all together, and this semester will be over with. So that is our purpose in coming together tonight. Unless there is an emergency or we see a need, this will be the last meeting of this nature on Thursday night until we have our town hall, and that's when we will bring closure to the Aptell and anything about the APSL that we need to talk about. And then at that time, Dr. Lamb will bring greetings to 603 and give you some suggestions and ideas of things that you can get started on after this semester's over with, and over the Christmas break. We would encourage you to begin looking at those things. But Dr. Lamb will touch base with that whenever we do our town hall. As a quick review, just remember when you started out with the Aptell that in task 1 that it was mainly a literature review, and where you just had to do research and best practices on these identified areas that you see here under prompt 1. And then you were required to create or find a checklist based on the research to aid in assessing current best practices in the school clinical setting. And then there was a checklist for teacher empowerment outside of the classroom that you had to come up with as well. And then we went to task 2. That is what you're working on begin working on this week. You're finishing up with task 1, and many of you have already cleared task 1 and have done a good job with that. And you've been given the go-ahead to proceed with full blast with task 2. But based on what we gave you last week, we're hoping that you had gone ahead and you were incorporating things that you needed to do with task 2 even before we came online this week. Because task 1 and task 2 basically they work together. In task 2, again, remember in prompt 1, we said that you see those same 5 areas. But the difference this time was the first time it was a literature review in those 5 areas. This time it is you were going to take the checklist and the checklist and the walkthrough and the instruments, and you were going to use them or use the data from them in task 2. You were going to incorporate those instruments, and this would come with your through your walkthroughs that you would do. We said that to try to do a minimum of 3. You were to interview your administration about their walkthrough experiences. What does it look like in the school? What do they consider the strengths? What do they consider the areas that need improvement? You know, to get your finger on that. So that was the interview part of it. You were also encouraged to spend to begin your 5 days of gathering data, and this would be through observation. You know, being about the school, observing and looking at what is going on. In addition to that, actually interviewing people, talking to teachers, talking to and you know about how they feel and actually what is going on. But it was to gather information. And then when you get to prompt 2, you were going to take all of your information and you were going to graphically represent that in prompt 2, where you're going to show the results. You talk about it in task 1, you're going to show it in task 2, and that is where you show the results of the instruments that you create, your walkthroughs, your teacher empowerment for school leadership questionnaire. All of that you're going to show those results here. In addition to that, anything else that you can gather from your observations, from your personal walkthroughs, from what the principal gives you, create visuals where we can see what actually has happened over that 5-day span and through your interview experience. Which leads us to, and all of that you're working on that, and we will see you will submit that on Sunday night for us to begin looking at. And we realize that some of this may be a work in progress still, but you're still to turn in on Sunday night, and we want you to be as comprehensive as possible, but realizing that, you know, based on when your 5 days started, that you may not quite be through with that, but Dr. Stone and I will understand that when you submit it. But don't just submit us, don't submit us nothing, and don't just submit something just for the sake of submitting. Make sure that it's that you're giving us something worth our time to look at and to give you some feedback on. Which brings us for this evening, we wanted to go ahead and we did introduce task 3 on Tuesday night, but we wanted to revisit task 3, because while you're doing all of this, you need to begin thinking about task 3 and how all of this is going to tie into that. Now, Dr. Stone with our groups did an excellent job on Tuesday night talking about the gap analysis. And the gap analysis is simply, you know, in task 1 again, you did the research. You know, this is what the literature says. This is what it says out there should be happening inside the classrooms with teacher leadership in the classroom. This is what should be happening outside the classrooms with teacher empowerment and all of those areas that you had to research. And then in task 2, this is actually what is happening. So in task 3, you're going to look at what is the gap. In task 1, what is the gap between what research says should be happening, and then in task 2, this is actually what is happening. And then that leads us to task 3, where you're going to put a teacher empowerment leadership growth plan together. It's basically a staff development plan for your school, because the whole purpose is that you, as an administrator, your job is to take your teachers and to make them better at their craft, to help them improve in areas, to look at every aspect of that teacher. You've invested in them. You hired them. They're the best you've got. And your job is to work with them to make them better at what they do, so the end result can be that you can have improved student achievement for your school, because in the end, that is what it is all about. Which leads us to prompt number 1, where you have to do an analytical narrative for each of these 10 areas, and you're going to put them in a growth plan. And I've asked Dr. Lamb if he would to take each of these 10 areas. He did an excellent job on Tuesday night, briefly saying what your narrative work should look like for each of these areas. And he's going to revisit that again at this time. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Lamb to speak.
All right, thank you, Dr. Stedman. All right, as we move through these are the things that you need to address narratively before, and then you're going to summarize them into the graphic organizer below. A vision for positive school environment. A positive school environment is where you have a culture of teaching and learning. It's where great teaching is prized. It's where everybody strives to be a great teacher and works on their craft in order to then assume leadership positions in the building. So when we talk about what makes a great school, well, it's student achievement. It's a culture of teaching and learning, where that's our purpose every day. That's the reason that's our vision mission is student achievement. Again, and as measured by standardized tests, not in somebody's opinion. This is data driven, that our kids are making growth every year, and they're learning more, and they're getting smarter every year that they're with us, rather than we're warehousing them and they're getting dumber every year that we have them. And so that's our vision. And from your literature review, that should have been clear about the whole purpose of empowering teachers to be better in their classroom, and then rewarding them with leadership positions, empowering them to be leaders in your school, is to promote best teaching practices. And the reason why we call them best practices is because they get good results. That's why we call them best practices. They're not just best practices because we enjoy doing them, they get results. And so that's your vision, is that we're going to create a culture and climate in our building where we prize great teaching and outcomes for students, and that we promote and work with those and help those people with that. And then those are the people that we put in charge. Dr. Stedman, I'm going to share my screen.
Okay. Do you want me to stop sharing?
Yeah, if you'll stop.
Okay.
Now, I've got the
Gotcha,
same
okay.
thing already pulled
Okay.
up.
Gotcha. Okay.
And let me go back to it, share. I've got the same thing here. Now,
Okay.
documentation to support identified needs. Again, that's going to come from your survey and your walkthrough data. And you say, well, what does that mean? Well, it means, again, that we're going to take these two documents, one's a survey, one's a walkthrough, and we're going to put another column over here to the right that says, this is what our percentage of this happening in our building. You know, 80% of our teachers utilize identifying similarities and differences, 100% do homework, only 10% do cooperative learning, and hardly any of them do non-linguistic representation. And so we're going to summarize that from the data that from our walkthrough experiences, but more from the principal's data. Is somebody answering those questions to keep?
I am.
All right. And so that's where that information comes from. And then you can obviously count up the number of responses you get in terms of empowerment opportunities up here on the Whitaker survey. And this is the walkthrough. Now, again, you may be using your walkthrough. There was a question Tuesday night. If the school system has adopted as a checklist, is that a validated, and has that been validated as a validated instrument? It has. You're just simply by the fact that your school district uses it, that means that that it is valid and it is reliable. It works the same way every time. Now, so that's where your documentation to support your identified need comes from. List of strategic indicators of success. Well, our indicators of success is student achievement. Our short-term goal might be to get more teachers using best practices, but our long-term goal is always going to be student success. So our specific short-term and long-term goals, short-term is get more teachers doing a better job teaching using these. Long-term is, and short-term is to get more teachers taking, our best teachers using leadership roles. But we can't forget, as Dr. Stedman said, in the end, this is about student achievement. You want to grow your faculty for the purpose of student achievement. We're not just trying to get them all shined up and doing a great job so they can go out and find better jobs. We want them to then employ that better, that being better to make our students better. That's the whole notion here. Activities address identified goals and objectives. Again, we have to have a plan in terms of what our goals and objectives are going to be. That's basically what is our staff development going to look like? And so here is mine. And don't ask if this is in your shell. You know we don't show you anything that's not in your shell. So here's mine. This is going to be my staff development plan. On August 20, during that, I'm going to start out with Marzano's Hot 9 high yield strategies, or what we call the best practices. I'm going to do whole group staff development. The adoption level of the staff is determined by percentage use of all 9 strategies, which is determined by walkthrough and formal observation, the information you got from your principal. All right, I'm going to start out with that. Now, how much I'm going to use is dependent upon the number. Remember, we said we're going to put a number. We're going to put a number on how many are using each one of these. Yes, no, they're doing it, and what is the number? And then we're going to kind of total that at the end. Now, here's kind of my rule of thumb. Now, don't ask me to write it down. Rule of thumb means it's that, a rule of thumb. I look at it as 30, 60, 90. If only 30% or less of your faculty has adopted anything, then you're not doing much. You better do some whole group instruction, and it better be more than just a few minutes. If I had less than 30% of my faculty that was using best practices, I'd go all day on that first work day. That's what we'd be working on. If I had 60%, then I would adjust it to probably about 2 hours. If I had 90% or more using best practices, it'd be 30 minutes to remind everybody this is what we do at this school. You have to maintain, even systems that are working well need a little oil, a little lubrication, a little retention, a little shine. Yeah, we're doing a great job. This is what we're doing. Maybe call on 2 or 3 people to recognize them. What a wonderful job I've seen them do in their classroom. And even if I had 90% or above, I'd still do 30 minutes because this is the coin of the realm. This is what school is about, teaching and learning. Best practices get us where we need to be on EVOS, our value add. And so my audience. Now, that's going to be how I start my staff development plan, the specifics of my plan. That's the bullet we're on right now. Let's remember where we are. We're on this bullet right here. Activities to address identified goals and objectives. This is where we are right now. This is what I'm going to do with my staff development. All right, back to my plan now. All right, from August 25th, the first semester, I'm going to go back and look at what percentage of usage for each of those 9 individual strategies. Now, I'm going to tell you before you even go and look, non-linguistic representation is going to be the lowest in your building. That's just the way it always works. But I'm going to take these in order of importance in terms of not being used very much in my building. Let's say non-linguistic representation, only 10% of the teachers are going to use that. That's the very first one I'm going to address in PLCs about every other week. 30 minutes in our PLC work every other week, we're going to bring in examples that we use in our classes of non-linguistic representation. And when somebody says, well, I don't have any, well, duh, that's the whole point. You don't have any. You ought to have some. And so we're going to start, and we're going to knock out about 2 of these a semester, the lowest rated ones each semester. Again, the amount of time we spend in PLC on this is going to be, I mean, how fast we move through these are going to be determined on the adoption level. Again, if it's less than 30%, we probably need to spend about the whole semester on it. If it's 60%, we'll probably do it for half a semester and then switch over. If it's 90, we'll just talk about it and move on. That's kind of a rule of thumb, my 30-60-90 rule, in terms of how we ought to be dealing with these things. But we're going to tackle these in small groups in PLC. We're going to work on the individual ones. We're going to hone our craft. We're going to get better and better and better on these. And then that first semester, my one-on-one peer coaching, all my new people, I'm going to start with them to make sure that they're paired with a great teacher. And I'm going to do something crazy. And we'll talk about it next semester in 603. But I'm going to unbalance my schedule. I said it. I'm not afraid to say it. I'm going to unbalance my schedule. So that means if I've got a new 3rd grade teacher, everybody in 3rd grade is not going to have the same planning time. Oh, my Lord. The roof didn't cave in. It's okay. And the reason why we're not going to have the same planning time, what good is it for Dr. Stedman and I to have the same planning time if we're teaching 3rd grade and I'm the new knucklehead and he's the expert if we're both in planning at the same time? What are we going to do, sit and look at one another? He's not teaching when I've got time to go and look at him, and I'm not teaching when he's got time to come and see me. So all we end up doing is sitting in the lounge and talking, or in the library, or one another's classroom that's not being used. Hard on the cart's not in our room. We sit in our room and talk. What good is that? We might tell a story or two and get a laugh, but it's not furthering the goals and the objectives of the organization. I need to be teaching when he's on planning so he can come and watch me. He needs to be teaching when I'm on planning so I can go and watch him. Now, that means you got to think outside the box a little bit on your master schedule. It can't be like it's always been, where all the teachers, the same teachers in the history department in high school all have planning at the same time, or all the 2nd grade teachers have planning at the same time. Can't be that way. And then for a while we thought, well, I tell you what we'll do. You know, I know we can't touch that master schedule because it's carved in stone. Moses brought it down with the commandments, and it survived the first 3 of them. So that's carved in stone that, you know, we have to do that. Here's an idea. If we'll hire a new 2nd grade teacher, we'll take a 4th grade teacher to be her mentor. Oh, that's a good idea. I mean, they both work in the same building. Surely that's close enough, isn't it? Not by a long shot. Not by a long shot. That's really bad practice. Really bad. If you hire a new 2nd grade teacher, you need to have somebody in the 2nd grade working with them. Because what do all first-year teachers really have a problem? They struggle with classroom management. We understand that. That's a function of student teaching, which is less than worthless. It's harmful. But don't get me started on that rant. So they're going to struggle enough with classroom management. Don't make them struggle with content as well. At least let them have a win somewhere, and it's going to have to be content to start with. And if you have somebody that's not familiar with their content or not in the same content as them, they lose on both ends, process and content and content. So don't do that to them. So that's what I'm going to do now. About mid-October, I'm going to add my low-performing teachers to the one-on-one as well. But you begin to see Now, you say, Dad, where'd you come up with this? This sounds pretty intelligent. Well, of course it does, because Linda Darling Hammond came up with it, not me. I'm not smart enough to have figured this out. I'm an operations person. These are the key parts of staff development. Whole group, small group, or PLC, and one-on-one. And you vary the amount of them according to the need. That's what we refer to as customized or tailored professional development. We tailor it to your need. It is not one size fits all. Next year won't even be the same as this year, because we should be further down the road if we made these things, if we were intentional about working with them, we'll be further down the road next year. But this is a customized staff development plan. That's not one size fits all, but that is targeted staff development. You hear targeted staff development? That's what this is, targeted staff development. Again, if you read Linda Darling Hammond, this is what you synthesize from that is targeted staff development. This is how it works. And so that's the specifics of your plan. So back to this. All right. A plan to communicate progress with vital stakeholders. That's the plan you just saw. Once you put it together, a specific timeline of activities. You saw that was on the plan as well. A plan for stakeholder involvement and buy-in, that everybody knows what their role is going to be in this. We tell them which group they're in. Specific roles, responsibilities, everybody, you can see that and that. Informative assignment assessment. Again, formative, we're going to look at the adults. Summative, we're going to look at test scores. And from that, we ought to be able to fill out our graphic organizer. And so that's what we're talking about. You've got to come up with a professional development plan that is tailored to your school. And it's based on how many of your teachers are using best practices and the individual best practices, at what rate, how well, how much do they need? Do they need all day on best practices, or will 30 minutes suffice? And that's what we call tailored staff development. I mean, that's not a one-size-fits-all model, and it will even change during the year at your school. Now, Dr. Crawford, are you there?
Right here.
Feedback.
Well, I mean, if you can actually pull it off, it's great. What you're going to come up against, not only from within the school, but sometimes even from outside the building, are people that want to actually dictate to you what you need in your building and how your schedule should work.
That's exactly right. There you go. Okay. I want to talk to a sitting elementary principal, because there is so much pressure. Thank you. There is so much pressure from outside the building on what your schedule should look like. I mean, people down to, local business people and politicians, everybody wants to say how the school ought to work, because it's always been that way. And it gores the ox of somebody's wife or somebody's cousin or brother or whatever. And everybody thinks that it ought to be this way because it's always been this way. That's why I said, contrary to popular opinion, it is not carved in stone. It did not come down with Moses with the 10 Commandments. You can unbalance your schedule if you want to, but you have to be able to tell people this is why we're doing it, and this is the purpose. We don't have this school for people to have a job. The reason we're here is for kids to learn. That's why you need to be able to make your case as to why. Again, making your case goes back to, if we do these things, we'll get growth from our kids. It's not about teacher convenience. I mean, I don't want to just give you the opinion that we just need to run over top of it. But if teachers need to understand, the coin of the realm is teaching and learning, not providing them a job, not their convenience. I know that's kind of antiquated. I mean, when I first started in the business, that's exactly what it was. But now we've got enough younger people who are a little more open-minded, and we're getting people now that you don't have to beat them over the head and convince them that it's the right thing to do to actually teach kids, that every kid deserves an opportunity. That's becoming more and more popular. I know that sounds facetious, but I'm telling you the truth. When I first started, we didn't care if kids learned or not. We didn't even have any assessment other than the California Achievement Test. The only reason we did that was so we'd have bragging rights down at the country club. We didn't care. When we passed the basic ed plan in '83, somebody said, well, that's all well and good, but what does that mean? Somebody said, well, I don't have any idea what that means. We'll have to actually write a curriculum so we'll know if they got it or not. And that's what we did. Took us 6 years from '83 to '89 to write the first round of the North Carolina Standard Course of Study, the big white notebooks, if you're old enough to remember them. That's the first time we'd ever had a curriculum in public schools in North Carolina. You taught what you wanted to, if you wanted to. Kids got it fine if they didn't fine. There was no guarantee if you went to school you got anything. So, you know, that's where we started 36 years ago. That's where we started. And so that defines the modern era of schooling from '83 to now is the modern era of schooling. When we finally said, wait a minute, kids ought to get something. It's not just a babysitter. They actually have to learn something. For those of us who started before then, you know, what a breath of fresh air, number one, but two, what a change in the culture of the buildings. What a
Dr.
change.
Lamb, there were a lot of people that were so resistant during that time. And actually those big white notebooks,
Yeah.
they collected dust in some places
Mhm.
because they said, you're not going to move me. You're not going to make me do anything differently.
You know, I've told the story before, and it's absolutely the truth. When I first started teaching, I started teaching with a group of World War II veterans. Most of them had gone to college on the GI Bill. Some of the younger ones were Korean War veterans, but they were all at the end of their career. And they still taught from the notes from when they were in college, 30 years later, 35 years later. Late 70s, early 80s, they still taught from those notes. And when the standard course of study came, they said, why would I do that? I've been teaching this all, you know, they'd say things like, well, chemistry hadn't changed in the last 30 years. Why would I not read my notes to them? Exactly. Some of those notes were so old, they looked like Dead Sea Scrolls. They were yellow. I never will forget. They about burned the building down running the laminator when we first got one so they could laminate their notes because they were so old they were beginning to fall apart. And they would get student assistants. You know what those student assistants would sit and do? They would block print their notes. When they would get too old, they'd start falling apart and fading, but they couldn't read them anymore. Student assistants would sit and copy their notes. And that's how teaching was done. We started there to where we are today. And so, but Dr. Crawford, of course, he's smarter than I am. You already knew that. But these things should not be controversial, but they are. They shouldn't be, but they are. And that's one of the things that we're going to work on next semester. I'm going to teach you how to build a legal master schedule. But you know, but it may gore some people's oxes. But you need to follow your data in building your master schedule, and you got to follow the law as well. And you know that I'm looking. We'll talk about it more in depth next semester. But school activity report goes in every month. The SAR, which is your master schedule, state checks it every month. It better be legal. It better be right, or you will be at home. That won't go well for you. And so I tell students all the time, the first night of 603, our job is not to build a master schedule, duty roster, and supervision schedule. Our job this semester is to build a legal master schedule, duty roster, and supervision schedule. A master schedule that will keep our job when we turn it in every month to the state on the school activity report, and a duty roster and a supervision schedule that'll keep us from losing our house when we get sued and go to court.
Dr. Lamb?
Yes.
With regard to the schedule, another thing that's becoming more and more to the forefront is that school boards in particular are looking at their student activity report not only for just general legality, but they're also looking at representation of students in certain classes. And that is going to be the next big fight.
Exactly. That's the
looking at
future.
how many students of color do you have in upper level classes? Why are all your AP classes populated by all white students? I mean, these are the conversations that you're going to have. So it's not
Yeah.
just, is it legal? But this talks about
Is it
the
ethical?
moral aspect. Is it ethical? And so
Is
just
it
know that
ethical?
that is going to be in your face from the get-go.
Yeah. And so next semester, we're going to introduce you to law policy, the legal, but we're also going to add the four ethical paradigms as well. We're going to add those next semester. That goes with federal law, state law, local board policy, and best practice, which is EBOS. That's the four big things in running a school management wise. To those four, we're going to add the four paradigms of ethics: profession, care, justice, and critique. We're going to add those as well. And that's exactly what Dr. Crawford is talking about. There's an ethical piece that goes with scheduling, not just a legal piece. There's an ethical piece that goes with that as well, that you're going to be asked to make sure that you visit that for equity and justice. Those two ethical paradigms, equity and justice, are two of the paradigms, and those will be applied to the things that you do as well. And so we will introduce those through our case study process next semester. And it's called the lesson plan, the role of the principal. It has your state law, that the 288, that says these are the duties of the principal. We'll also have the federal law. We'll have local board policy, but then we'll have the ethical paradigm that goes with that as well. But that's exactly right. And the reason why we've added that is for exactly what Dr. Crawford just said. They're going to check, your SAR is checked every month, your school activity report or your master schedule is checked every month. School boards are getting into that now because community activists are saying, wait a minute, this schedule is inherently discriminatory. Does anybody not see this? This pretty much guarantees that these kids don't get what they need. And so, yeah, that's going to be a piece that you have to have. So now is a good time. I know it seems like a minor thing when I wrote this up, but a veteran principal or administrator, when they see that last one there where you have to unbalance your schedule and change and have planning time different than it's always been, it's not revolutionary. It's just going to stir the pot. I can tell you that. But there's really not any other way to do that, to get that one-on-one. It says make sure planning times don't match so that the mentor and the mentee can see each other teach. That sounds pretty innocuous until you think about what that means in practice. Oh my. That will shake the pillars of the foundation in some school buildings, that we would do something like that. And so what we've done in the past is, rather than giving them somebody that could actually help them, we've just given them somebody else that was convenient, that happened to be on planning that time. We look, who's going to be Dale's mentor? Well, let's see who's got planning when he does. What? Or who? I mean, that literally, we've done that. Who doesn't have planning so could go in his room? Well, let's see now. He teaches chemistry and physics. The band teacher, he can go in. He became one of my best friends. That's sad but true tale, folks. Sad but true tale. The band director became one of my best friends. Andy Gibson. Loved Andy to this day. But that's how ridiculous that was. That's how ridiculous that was. And we sat and we thought, well, that's the right thing to do. And we know now that we couldn't have malpracticed more if we'd have tried on a new teacher than to do something like that. So, I mean, there's been other people. I mean, how close is the band room, or or the room's close? I mean, we put mentors and mentees together for less efficacious reasons than that, if you can believe it. So, That's
Dr.
what
Lamb, I'm looking at a lot of the comments, and many of them have experienced some things, but this is the light bulbs coming on for many of them as we're talking. The big takeaway is that, you know, you should be realizing now as growing into administration, these are things, best practices that you will make every effort not to allow to happen when you become an administrator.
Exactly. You folks experience enough to know what works and doesn't work. Don't forget that part. We want you to change your lens and look at things from the other side of the desk from administrator's perspective. But that doesn't mean that we want you to change who you are. You just change your lens because you have gained invaluable experience as a teacher. Who better to direct teachers than somebody who knows where you are and what you've done? You know, one of the reasons I have problems with some of the people that we choose to lead organizations is they don't have any experience actually doing the work of the organization. I don't understand how that can be. I mean, how do you hire somebody to direct teachers that never taught? You know, that's kind of like, you know, I don't know anything about teaching, but I stayed the Holiday Inn Express last night.
I'm laughing at Amber.
Yeah, you know, I sat in on a doctoral final defense not long ago. I can't make this up. I'm not smart enough. Y'all know that. I sat in a doctoral final defense, and a person came to that defense and said to the person who was defending his doctorate, who was the superintendent, or who is the superintendent, and he did a study of superintendents, and the person said to him, I've never been a superintendent and I haven't read your study, but here's what you need to do to fix it. That's a verbatim quote. And I you know, I could have fell out of my seat. That's about as mad as I've ever seen that person's committee chairman, who's a faculty, you know, colleague of mine. It was about as angry, the most angry I've ever seen. That somebody would have the audacity to say, I've never done that job. I hadn't even read your study, but here's what you need to do to fix it. How many times, folks, that happens more times than we'd like to admit in our business. That's kind of a common theme in our business. I've never done that, and I really don't know what you're doing in your room, but here's what you ought to be doing. How smart is that? We need people in there to know what you're doing and know what you ought to be doing, because they're going to go down the hall and do that very same thing just in a few minutes. That's what we're talking about. I mean, we have Dr. Crawford here. One of the reasons why, you know, that he's here is he's a quality person and an excellent administrator, but he's in the job every day. He keeps us grounded. This is what he does for a living. We've done it, but we're old. We need somebody who does it every day to tether us and bring us back in. Well, wait a minute now. You know, if you quit preaching and now you're meddling, you know, you can't go that far. You have to, you know, and we can't just burn the place down. You go back up a little bit on that one, maybe. We're not ready for that quite yet. And that's what keeps us grounded. So in every one of the pods, every one of the courses, every pod we have, we make sure we have somebody that's a currently practicing principal that's working with that group, so that it keeps us grounded into what is. You know, I always push for what it ought to be, but we have a principal here to say this is what is. Let's be realistic now. And so that sitting in the seat is invaluable. There is no substitute for that. You're sitting in the seats. You know what it is. And you know what it can be, more important. This is your way. This is kind of the benediction for me. This professional development plan is your way to put your input on your school in terms of, remember, you don't teach a soul. You don't teach any of the kids. But this is your way to have your impact on that building. Is through your professional development plan. This is your impact. This is your area. Dr. Stedman, thank you for inviting me tonight.
Yeah, Dr. Lamb, and I just want to, the growth plan, once you do the narrative work, the graphic organizer is no different from what you've already used with the APSL, and it's already pretty much spelled out what your headings should be. You just go back up here. The information that you have written here, you basically take it and you put it into your graphic organizer so that we can see it. And again, it tells you specifically what are the things that you're going to do to try to improve your staff development activities, to try to improve the teacher learning process in your school. And then again, these are self-explained, the timeline, who's going to be responsible for that, what are you going to need to get it done, et cetera, et cetera. You can see along the lines in there. You do this no differently than you did, with the APSL, except you're looking at teacher leadership and teacher empowerment this time versus student achievement. So, any comments, Dr. Crawford? Any closing comments that you would like to make?
No, just in line with what Dr. Lamb said. For those of you that work in a high school, one of your biggest hills to climb is going to be, and I know because I was one of them. Many high school teachers think they teach content and not kids. And so when you're looking at changing the master schedule and doing things that are going to benefit kids, the pushback is going to be real, and so you just need to be prepared to deal with that.
Absolutely. When you ask them, they say, "I teach chemistry," and you never hear a high school teacher say, "I teach kids." That's absolutely true. Absolutely.
Dr. Stedman, can I just say one thing?
Sure. I was going to ask anybody else. Yeah.
Dr. Lamb is right. The way you improve your teachers and therefore translates into improved student learning is through your staff development plan. But how many times has your school set up a professional development at your school and your principal didn't show up or attend the professional development? Now that is very telling to me. You should never have a professional development in your school if you're not willing to be there, not sit at the back of the room answering your email, but be there and being active participant. Number one, the message that sends is unbelievably strong to your staff that this is important. This is important enough for me to take my time to be here and to support you as we are learning and honing our craft. Secondly, if you don't attend the professional development, how are you going to know how to follow up, monitor, and coach? You're not. So again, don't forget your presence speaks volumes to your staff about your commitment to that professional development and the follow through and the implementation and the expectation of that implementation in your classrooms. Thank you, Dr. Stedman.
Thank you. I don't know who else has joined us. Any other staff member that has joined us? Would you have any final comments? I don't know if anybody else was able to join us or not.
Dr. Hamilton was in bad shape.
Yeah, and Dr. Stone was with us earlier, but he had to.
Yeah.
He told me he had to leave.
Yeah.
But
Dr. Revis, your comments are so well taken.
Yeah.
So well taken. If you prize it, you'll supervise it.
Exactly.
And again, make the staff development yours. Make the commitment before you even get in the job, that when you get in the job, that your impact is going to be through staff development, and it's not going to be done to you. It's going to be done with you, and that you're going to be the leader of the staff development in your building. Dr. Stedman, take us home. We're done.
okay, I was just. Laura had sent me a private message. Laura, just send me that same message through an email after this is over with, and we'll communicate. That's pretty much it. You know what you've got to do. We would ask you to, just to make sure that you are spending your time wisely, getting as much done as possible. Again, you realize the time factor involved, and you know what's got to be done. But we felt like that we needed to go over this one more time so that you would hopefully be able to put all the pieces together with, and it would make it easier as you're working on these tasks. Your instructors, we will go over task 4. Task 4 is going to be the easiest of all of them because it's a repeat of what you did with the APSL, and is just completing the remaining 9 competencies that you have not completed. So we're not minimizing the importance of that. It's just that, we'll talk about that later on because there's so many other things that you've got to do right now. We will see you again next Tuesday. Everybody have a good night.